Well, it is finally time for the Pokémon Masters Summer event, and oh my gosh, I need this, you do not understand. Okay, so yes, I've known about this for a while. We're gonna be getting Summer Arezu and Pokémon Masters. I am totally, completely calm and normal about this. Well, anyway, it's gonna be a few days before I'm actually able to even try scouting for Arezu, so let's go ahead and talk about that event because I really did like the story. After a very stormy night on Pasio and a little cameo from Team Aqua, the very next morning, Akari is walking along the beach and notices an injured Pokemon that was washed in by the storm, and after she gives it a potion and it turns around and we're able to actually see what it is, surprise surprise, it's a Manaphy, the two of them start to get to know each other a little better. As over the next few days, Akari has been watching over Manaphy while it's healing, she ends up talking with Marlin, who's a really cool character to see here, and he actually lets her know some of the legends about Manaphy, that it supposedly has some mysterious power that was mentioned in the legends. Then when you think about it, even though Akari is somebody who came from Hisui, I guess technically she wouldn't know about the legends because they were literally written during her time, as very likely a lot of that lore would be established when you, the player character, go track down Manaphy in the video game and then tell Professor Laventon about it, who is the one to write the Pokédex entry. So Adaman and Arita show up and catch up with them, and they're discussing how Manaphy is doing well, but how that it will eventually want to go back to the ocean, and obviously Akari is expecting that. She wanted to help out the Pokemon and make sure that it only returns to the ocean when it's good and ready. But while these two are having a really good time connecting, meanwhile Arezu is dealing with a Basculegion that they found in a space-time distortion that they were recently investigating, very likely the one referenced in the last event, though the reason she's having difficulty with Basculegion is just because it's a very temperamental Pokemon in general, calling back to the Pokédex entry about how it is supposedly imbued with the spirits of its fallen brethren. Obviously a really cool idea for Basculegion and one that I've loved in the lore since we got it, but really I think we have yet to see a really good storied event beyond the video game that it first appeared in that shows a sort of difficulty of bonding with a Pokemon like this. But also it is a particularly difficult situation because this Basculegion is a Pokemon from Hisui who has found itself in modern day, so on top of that it's probably feeling even more alone than it would have before, being the sole survivor of its school and then now being basically the only Basculegion on Pasio. There is a nice little moment too as Arita's Zoroark shows up, as she was partnered with that in one of the previous events, and they shout out how they're potentially similar with Hisui and Zoroark's bitterness and then now Basculegion's rage, and then Manaphy is also here getting a little curious about their situation. Just then Akari suggests that maybe there's something they can do to better bond with their Pokemon, and that is when Arita seconds it by saying that maybe they could coordinate their outfits the same way that everybody else does on Pasio. And yes, I agree, this is 100% totally necessary, we gotta do it for Basculegion. So we cut to both Akari and Arezu in their brand new outfits that match each of their Pokemon, and I think they look really nice. Obviously Akari's is really nice, it's very cool, and it is meant to match Manaphy in the royalty sort of vibe. And then Arezu's, obviously I cannot say enough good things about this, it is amazing. A little more beachy attire meant to be very flowy, very similar to Basculegion, and then also the ways that the colors match is really cool as well. And then just the fact that it is something so different from her default outfit, though it is what I should expect for the summer outfits. But okay, I'm gonna stop myself there, let's continue on with the story. Manaphy is obviously very happy with the brand new outfit, however Basculegion is just not seeing the vision and decides to run off. Though next up we have a little conversation between both Akari and Arita, as they're discussing Manaphy continuing to stay on land, which is a little uncomfortable for it, but it needs to do that in order to heal, before eventually returning to the ocean. Though like I said before, Akari was going into this with the knowledge of returning Manaphy to the ocean at some point, so she wasn't planning to form an official sync pair with it at any point, though I think Arita really wants them to stay together, especially after she points out how similar they both are. Back to Arezu and Basculegion, I really do admire how she's not giving up, even getting a little aggressive at some point with how she's speaking, but as her clan leader, Adaman understands that this is just her not wanting to make the same mistake she made before, referencing the events of a video game, one of the many reasons I love Arezu as a character, because her arc was one of really wanting to get things done herself in order to care for people, at first not realizing that things would be better if she leans on other people, and then eventually when she gets injured and is confronted with this, that's when she really grows to rely on other people and better strengthen the bonds between them, which again also eventually leads to the Diamond and Pearl clans coming together. So then here on Pokemon Masters, she's being upfront about relying on other people in order to connect to Basculegion, and even then she's really trying her best to communicate this idea of not letting Basculegion be alone, because in that sense she sees a bit of herself in this Pokemon. But even as she gets some good encouragement from Adaman and Marlin, the tension begins to grow with Arezu almost yelling at Basculegion saying like, hey listen, you don't have to be alone, I'm here to care for you. she decides to communicate that head on by bringing out Lilligant and getting into a battle with Basculegion, and oh my gosh, that type matchup isn't looking good for our fishy boy. Though before the battle goes on even longer and anybody really gets hurt, that's when Akari and Manaphy come forward, and Akari has Manaphy use its mysterious power to allow them both to bond. And you know, this isn't just something from the movie that we're seeing adapted here, because even in the Pokédex entries of Pokemon Platinum, we had seen this ability discussed, though we never really had the exact details of how Manaphy would allow others to bond, but I'm guessing it's something similar to what we see in the movie. So that is what we see going on here, and I'm assuming that it is just Manaphy allowing both of these to communicate a little more mentally, or at least have their general feelings communicated to each other. And that is just what we need, as Basculegion is able to calm down, now finally understanding Arezu, and you know, her also understanding Basculegion a bit more, so they have a nice little moment finally connecting, and I love how it's all gone about, because even though she did get help from Akari and Manaphy, it all came about because people and Pokemon were bonding. Eventually, Manaphy heals, and it's about time for it to return back to the ocean, and once again, even though Akari is ready for the Prince of the Sea to return to the sea, Irida is a little worried about this, mostly noticing how much they bonded, and really hoping that maybe there might be some way they could stay together, though at the end of it, Akari is really thinking about Manaphy, especially taking into consideration the fact that they are all displaced in time. Again, the events of Pokemon Masters are generally non-canon, but for the most part, the idea is that eventually everybody there will return back to their own time periods and universes, so with Basculegion being a Pokemon that actually came from Hisui just like Arezu, it would be a different situation with Akari who is from Hisui and then this Manaphy that is from modern day. And in that she also mentions how much she thinks about Ray whenever she brings up Manaphy, because Manaphy itself is already displaced from its home being on land rather than the ocean, while Ray was living in a different time period and was living in Hisui. So during this beautiful beach sunset, that is when Manaphy returns back to the ocean. However, a few days later, Akari is once again on the beach looking out into the distance, you know, totally normal behavior, then that is when Manaphy actually returns. All the other Hisuian characters show up and are really happy to see that they've reunited, saying that they all knew Manaphy was actually looking for Akari. Sure, it just went back out sea to play for a little bit, the boy needs his water, but with all the time it spent with Akari, they actually really formed a bond. And having Ray acknowledge this is also really powerful because of what she had said earlier, because he is also somebody from a very different time period than everybody else in Hisui, but I would imagine that with everything they've been through together, he would much rather stay with them. A very nice way to explain away that detail of the player character never actually returning home in Legends Arceus, but I think it is a really nice moment and a great end to the event. Of course, Arezu and Basculegion had to overcome their difficulties, but even with an obstacle like time itself in between Akari and Manaphy, they were both able to overcome it. I guess you could say they did that. Regardless, the idea of them being friends despite coming from different time periods is the main point. So anyway, that is all for Pokemon Masters Summer 2026, and yes, I gotta say this might be one of my favorites. I really am a fan of the sync pairs, obviously both of them being Hisuian characters, which I just love Legends Arceus, and the fact that one of them is Arezu is even better. The story is really fun and is definitely in line with these Pokemon that were featured, and it is yet another great way to mix up these summer vibes compared to the previous years, which were all also doing their own thing. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below about this event, all the connections that we saw to previous Pokemon games, and tell me which of the two sync pairs are your favorite. At the time of posting this video, Akari is going to be live, so let me know if you scouted Akari yet, but like I said, we're going to have to wait a few days before you get Arezu, but you can bet I will be waiting. If you enjoyed watching the video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and hype the video up as well. But anyway, right now, let me get back to saving my gems and enjoying my summer because, oh boy, this is going to be a good one. Thank you to every channel member for your continued support, including the great Gators, Cemetery Hill, Shinseto, Nick, Marvin, Candy Chambers, Gablink, Starved Rock, Neoculture Mimikyu, Christopher, Charizard's Plushverse, Tooth, Cosmo Zero, Shiny Swints, Starshooter, KoiKoi13, Cheez-It62, GatorKid509, TF, Mathaclock947, Taijirai, and Quago. If you would like to support, see your name here, get access to emotes for comments, live streams, sometimes early videos, and a members-only Discord server, you can become a channel member today. You can also follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky as well for more memes. Anyway, this is GatorEX, and I will catch you all later.